Hello. Hello. Hi. Hi everyone. Hi. Please don't mention my viewer count. Hi. Oh, thank you for the follow, Scorpion. Welcome. I hope you enjoy the stream. And welcome everyone. Today we're doing something a little bit different. Instead of the whisper ASMR, which really kind of ruined my throat, we'll be doing a fairy tale read-along ASMR today. Hi Cuckoo, hello. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm trying to keep my voice as soft as possible, but hi everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day. I hope you listen to this and fall asleep, maybe. I hope you're having a good weekend, a good long weekend. Perfect time for a bedtime story, yeah. But we also have a little bit of fun today. We have some specials that you can claim. I will do pickup lines, and I also have Twilight as an option because someone suggested it and I figured it would be good as a incentive. But yes, today I have the original Grimm Brothers collection of fairy tales, so these will be the original fairy tales and not the Disney ones. So they will be a bit darker. I am not aware of any potential triggers, but I trust you know yourself enough. But before we start, I want you guys to help me decide on which fairy tale we should read. They have everything. So we have Rapunzel, we have Hansel and Gretel, we have Cinderella. I'm pretty sure one of these is Snow White. Oh, we do have Snow White. Some of these I am not very sure. Or I'm not sure if they have Little Red Riding Hood or if it's called something else. They have... Oh my god. There are like 70... There are 70 stories in here. I don't think it's called Little Red Riding Hood. It might be called something else. There's Little Red Cap. That might be it. That might be it. Let's see. Any will do, you don't mind? Okay. Okay. This is Little Red Riding Hood. But in this book, it is called Little Red Cap. Okay. Are the background sounds too loud? Will you guys let me know if the background sounds are too loud? like the fire sounds and the page turning sounds. Okay, hold on. That's fine? Okay. Okay, before I start, let me actually tweet that I'm live, because I never tweet that I'm live. One second, you can just listen to the calming sounds of the fire and the pages. Okay. Well, we'll start with Little Red Riding Hood, or Little Red Cap. Once upon a time, there was a sweet little maiden. Whoever laid eyes upon her couldn't help but love her. But it was her grandmother who could never give the child enough. One day, she made her a present, a small red velvet cape, cap, and since it was so becoming, and the maiden always wanted to wear it, people only called her Little Red Cap. One day, her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, take this piece of cake and bottle of wine and bring them to your grandmother. She's sick and weak, and this will strengthen her. Be nice and good and greet her from me." Go in directly there and don't stray from the path, otherwise you'll fall and break the glass, and your grandmother will get nothing. Little Red Cap promised to obey her mother. Well, the grandmother lived out in the forest, half an hour from the village, and as soon as Little Red Cap entered the forest, she encountered a wolf. Alright, hello. We're reading Little Red Riding Hood today, or right now. Well, welcome. It's called Little Red Cap, by the way. So she encountered the wolf. However, Little Red Cap didn't know what a wicked sort of animal he was, and was not afraid of him. "Hey, Little Red Cap," he said. "Thank you kindly, wolf." "Where are you going so early, Little Red Cap?" "To grandmother's." What are you carrying under your apron?" "Cake and wine." "My grandmother's sick and weak, and yesterday we baked this cake so it will help her get well. I wipe out. Hello. And thank you for the follow. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but thank you, Moretto. Thank you. Well, welcome, Wipeout. We're reading Little Red Riding Hood. Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Cap? About a quarter of an hour from here in the forest. Her house is under the 3 big oak trees. You can tell it by the hazel bushes, Little Red Cap. The wolf thought to himself, "What a juicy morsel she'll be for me. Now, how am I going to catch her?" Then he said, "Listen, Little Red Cap, haven't you seen the beautiful flowers growing in the forest? Why don't you look around? I believe you haven't even noticed how lovely the birds are singing. You march along as if you are going straight to school in the village, and yet it's so delightful out here in the woods." Little Red Cap looked around and saw that the sun had broken through the trees and that the woods were full of beautiful flowers. So she thought to herself, if I bring grandmother a bunch of flowers, she'd certainly like that. It's still early and I'll arrive on time. Hi, Van. So she plunged into the woods to look for flowers, and each time she plucked one, she thought she saw another even prettier flower and ran after it, going deeper and deeper into the forest. But the wolf went straight to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Who's there? Little Red Cap, I brought you some cake and wine. Open up. Just lift the latch, the grandmother called. I'm too weak and can't get up. The wolf lifted the latch and the door sprang open. Then he went straight to the grandmother's bed and gobbled her up. Next, he took her clothes, put them on along with her nightcap, lay down in her bed, and drew the curtains. Meanwhile, Little Red Cap had been running around and looking for flowers, and only when she had as many as she could carry did she continue on the way to her grandmother. She was puzzled when she found the door open, and as she entered the room, it seemed so strange inside that she thought, oh my god, how frightened I feel today. And usually, I like to be at my grandmother's. Then, she went to the bed, drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother with her cap pulled down over her face, giving her a strange appearance. Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have. The better to hear you with. Oh, grandmother, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with. Oh, grandmother, what big hands you have. The better to grab you with. Oh, grandmother, what a terribly big mouth you have. The better to eat you with. No sooner did the wolf say that than he jumped out of bed and gobbled up poor Little Red Cap. After the wolf had the fat chunks in his body, he lay down in bed again, fell asleep, and began to snore very loudly. The huntsman happened to be passing by the house and thought to himself, the way the old woman's snoring, you better see if something's wrong. He went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw the wolf lying in it. He had been searching for the wolf a long time, and thought that the beast had certainly eaten the grandmother. Perhaps she can still be saved, he said to himself. I won't shoot. So he took some scissors and cut open the wolf's belly. After he made a couple of cuts, he saw the Little Red Cap shining forth, and after he made a few more cuts, the girl jumped out and exclaimed, oh, how frightened I was. It was so dark in the wolf's body. Soon, the grandmother emerged alive. Little Red Cap quickly fetched some large heavy stones, and they filled the wolf's body with them. When he awoke and tried to run away, the stones were so heavy that he fell down at once and died. All three were delighted. The huntsman skinned the fur from the wolf. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine that Little Red Cap had brought, and Little Red Cap thought to herself, never again will you stray from the path by yourself and go into the forest when your mother has forbidden it. Shield. That's what I want to know. Apparently, they cut open the wolf and saved Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. This is very interesting. It's also been told that Little Red Cap returned to her grandmother one day to bring some baked goods. Another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her to leave the path. But this time, Little Red Cap was on her guard. She went straight ahead and told her grandmother that she had seen the wolf, that he had wished her a good day, but that he had such a mean look in his eyes, that he would have eaten me if we hadn't been on the open road. Come, said grandmother, we'll lock the door so he can't get in. Soon after, the wolf knocked and cried out, Open up, grandmother, it's Little Red Cap, and I brought you some baked goods. But they kept quiet and didn't open the door. So the wolf circled the house several times and finally jumped on top of the roof. He wanted to wait till evening when Little Red Cap would go home. He intended to sneak after her and eat her up in the darkness. But the grandmother realized what he had in mind. In front of the house was a big stone trough. And she said to the child, Fetch the bucket, Little Red Cap. I cooked sausages yesterday. Get the water they were boiled in and pour it into the trough. Little Red Cap kept carrying the water until she had filled the big trough. Then the smell of sausages reached the nose of the wolf. He sniffed and looked down. Finally, he stretched his neck so far that he could no longer keep his balance on the roof. He began to slip from the roof and fell right into the big trough and drowned. Then Little Red Cap went happily and safely to her home. The end. This reminds you of the old Three Little Pigs story. I wonder if they have Three Little Pigs here. Yeah, you don't have to say sorry. You guys can chat. I might not respond until after I'm done with the story, but you guys can chat. That's fine with me. Also, I saw someone hydrated, so I will hydrate. Yeah, water. Now I have a water timer, so you guys can also remember to drink your water. Okay, I think I should put a list of stories that I've read on the screen. Hold on. My OBS is a bit slow today, so it's going to take a while, but please let me know if I'm lagging, because I can't tell. You brought a water bottle? You should drink from it. Seems okay? Okay, that's good. Because it's not okay for me. Okay, name me, give me another suggestion for the next story. Chibi water, what's that? What are our options? Out of the common ones, we have Cinderella, Rapunzel. We have Hansel and Gretel. We have Puss in Boots. I think we might have... Oh, we have Snow White. Rumpelstiltskin. But there are like over 100 in here, so... All of them? You've never read fairy tales? Okay. We'll start with like the popular ones and then we'll make our way through everything else. Rapunzel? Okay. Let me see. Is the font really huge? Yeah, my OBS today is not being very good to me, so everything is taking like 5 minutes. Oh, we will read Rapunzel. No. Tutorials. The first one was when writing me. And the second one is Rapunzel. There. You guys can see it, right? Okay. So, this will be Rapunzel. Once upon a time, there lived a husband and wife who had been wishing for a child for many years, but it had all been in vain. Finally, the woman became pregnant. Now, in the back of their house, the couple had a small window that overlooked a fairy's garden, filled with all kinds of flowers and herbs. But nobody ever dared to enter it. One day, however, when the wife was standing at the window and looking down into the garden, she noticed a bed of wonderful Rapunzel. She had a great craving to eat some of the lettuce, and yet she knew that she couldn't get any. So she began to waste away and looked wretched. Her husband eventually became horrified and asked what was ailing her. "If I don't get any of that Rapunzel from the garden behind our house, I shall have to die." Her husband loved her very much and thought, no matter what it costs, you're going to get her some Rapunzel. So one evening, he quickly climbed over the high wall into the garden, grabbed a handful of Rapunzel, and brought the lettuce to his wife. Then she immediately made a salad and ate it with great zest. However, the Rapunzel tasted so good to her, so very good, that her craving for it became 3 times greater by the next day. Her husband knew that if she was ever to be satisfied, he had to climb into the garden once more. And so he went over the wall into the garden, but was extremely terrified when he stood face to face with a fairy, who angrily berated him for daring to come into the garden and stealing her Rapunzel. He excused himself as best he could by explaining that his wife was pregnant. and that it had become too dangerous to deny her the Rapunzel. "All right," the fairy finally spoke. "I shall permit you to take as much Rapunzel as you like, but only if you give me the child that your wife is carrying." In his fear, the man agreed to everything, and when his wife gave birth, the fairy appeared at once and named the girl Rapunzel and took her away. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child under the sun, but when she turned 12, the fairy locked her in a very high tower that had neither doors nor stairs, only a little window high above. Whenever the fairy wanted to enter the tower, she would stand below and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had radiant hair, as fine as spun gold. Each time she heard the fairy's voice, she unpinned her braids and wound them around a hook on the window. Then she let her hair drop 20 yards and the fairy would climb up on it. One day, a young prince went riding through the forest and came upon the tower. He looked up and saw beautiful Rapunzel at the window. When he heard her singing with such a sweet voice, he fell completely in love with her. However, since there were no doors in the tower and no ladder could ever reach her high window, he fell into despair. Nevertheless, he went into the forest every day until one time he saw the fairy who called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." As a result, he now knew what kind of ladder he needed to climb up into the tower. He took careful note of the words he had to say, and the next day, at dusk, he went to the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." But she let her hair drop, and when her braids were at the bottom of the tower, he tied them around him and she pulled him up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly afraid. But soon the young prince pleased her so much that she agreed to see him every day and pulled him into the tower. Thus, for a while they had a merry time and enjoyed each other's company. The fairy didn't become aware of this until one day Rapunzel began talking and said to her, "Tell me, Mother Gothel, why are my clothes becoming too tight? They don't fit me anymore." "Oh, you godless child," the fairy replied, "what's this I hear?" And she immediately realized that she had been betrayed and became furious. Then she grabbed Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wrapped it around her left hand a few times, picked up a pair of scissors with her right hand, and snip, snap, the hair was cut off. Afterward, the fairy banished Rapunzel to a desolate land where she had to live in great misery. In the course of time, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. On the same day that the fairy had banished Rapunzel, she fastened the braids that she had cut off to the hook on the window. And that evening, when the prince came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the braids down. But when the prince climbed up into the tower, he was astonished to find the fairy instead of Rapunzel. "Do you know what, you villain?" the angry fairy said. "Rapunzel is lost to you forever." In his despair, the prince threw himself from the tower. He escaped with his life, but he lost both eyes. Sadly, He wandered around in the forest, eating nothing but grass and roots, and did nothing but weep. Some years later, he made his way to the desolate land where Rapunzel was leading a wretched existence with her children. When he heard her voice, it sounded familiar at first, and then he immediately recognized it. She recognized him too, and embraced him. Two of her tears fell upon his eyes. Then his eyes became clear again, and he could see as usual. You know, I somehow expected these stories to be a lot worse, but I haven't been so bad so far. Wretched, yeah. Honestly, I feel like the original version of the story is worse than this, but I'm not going to talk about it. Being sent to a desolate land is bad enough. Yeah, with your twin children. Can you imagine being like pregnant and then being exiled to live a wretched existence? That sounds terrible. Okay, this was a shorter one than Red Riding Hood. What shall we read next? Oh my... The third story in this book is called The Virgin Mary's Child. I'm not sure if I want to read that. Shall we read Hansel and Gretel? Let's read Hansel and Gretel. We'll do Rumpelstiltskin after. Oh my god, Brian. I thought you were giving me water for a second. But hi, welcome. I'm reading you guys to bed. We're reading fairy tales today. I love to give me hydrate. Thank you. Okay, we shall read Hansel and Gretel. I have hydrated. It's okay. Oh my god. Okay. This fairy tale is called Hansel and Gretel. A poor woodcutter lived on the edge of a large forest. He didn't have a bite to eat and barely provided the daily bread for his wife and two children, Hansel and Gretel. It reached a point when he couldn't even provide that anymore. Indeed, He didn't know how to solve his predicament. One night, as he was tossing and turning in bed because of his worries, his wife said to him, "Listen to me, husband. Early tomorrow morning, you're to take both the children and give them each a piece of bread. Then lead them into the middle of the forest where it is most dense. After you build a fire for them, go away and leave them there. We can no longer feed them." "No, wife," the man said. "I don't have the heart to take my own children and abandon them to wild beasts, for they'd soon come and tear them apart in the forest." "If you don't do that," his wife responded, "we shall all have to starve to death." She didn't give him any peace until he said yes. The two children were still awake because of their hunger, and they had heard everything that their mother said to their father. Gretel thought, "Now it's all over for me," and began to weep pitiful tears. But Hansel spoke. "Be quiet, Gretel. Don't get upset. I'll find a way to help us." Upon saying this, he got up, put on his little jacket, opened the bottom half of the door, and crept outside. The moon was shining very brightly, and the white pebbles glittered in front of the house like pure silver coins. Hansel stooped down to the ground and stuffed his pocket with as many pebbles as he could fit in. Then he went back into the house. "Don't worry, Gretel. Just sleep quietly." And he lay down again in his bed and fell asleep. Early in the morning, before the sun had even begun to rise, their mother came and woke the two children. "Get up, children. We're going into the forest. Here's a piece of bread for each of you, but be smart and don't eat it until noon." Gretel put the bread under her apron because Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket, and they all set out together into the forest. After they had walked a while, Hansel stopped still and looked back at the house. He did this time and again until his father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at there, and why are you dawdling? Pay attention and march along." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my little white cat that's sitting up on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." "You fool," the mother said. "That's not a cat. It's the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel had not been looking at the cat. Instead, he had been looking at the shiny pebbles from his pocket that he had been dropping on the ground. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Children, I want you to gather some wood. I'm going to make a fire so you won't get cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered together some brushwood and built quite a nice little pile. The brushwood was soon kindled, and when the fire was in place, the mother said, "Now, children, lie down by the fire and sleep. We're going into the forest to chop wood. When we're finished, we'll come back and get you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, they kept eating their pieces of bread until evening. But their mother and father did not return. Nobody came to fetch them. When it became pitch dark, Gretel began to weep, but Hansel said, "Just wait a while until the moon has risen." and when the full moon had risen, Hansel took Gretel by the hand. The pebbles glittered like newly minted silver coins and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long and arrived back at their father's house at break of day. Their father rejoiced with all his heart when he saw his children again, for he had not liked the idea of abandoning them alone in the forest. Their mother also seemed to be delighted by their return, but secretly she was angry. Not long after this, there was once again nothing to eat in the house, and one evening, Gretel heard her mother say to their father, "The children found their way back one time, and I just let that go. But now there's nothing left in the house except for a loaf of bread. Tomorrow, you must take them further into the forest so they won't find their way back home again. Otherwise, there's no hope for us." All this saddened the father, and he thought, it'd be much better to share your last bite to eat with your children. But since he had given in the first time, he also had to yield a second. Hansel and Gretel overheard their parents' conversation. Then Hansel got up and intended to gather pebbles once again, but their parents had locked the door. Nevertheless, he comforted Gretel and said, "Just sleep, dear Gretel. The dear Lord will certainly help us." Early the next morning, they each received little pieces of bread, but they were smaller than the last time. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled the bread in his pocket and stopped as often as he could to throw the crumbs on the ground. "Hansel, why are you always stopping and looking around?" asked the father. "Keep going." "Oh, I'm looking at my little pigeon that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," Hansel answered. "You fool," his mother said. "That's not your little pigeon. It's the morning sun shining on the chimney." Now, their mother led the children even deeper into the forest until they came to a spot they had never been to before in their lives. Once again, they were to sleep by a large fire, and their parents were to come and fetch them in the evening. When noon came, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel because he had scattered his along the way. Noon went by, and then evening passed, but no one came for the poor children. Hansel comforted Gretel and said, "Just wait until the moon has risen, Gretel, and I'll see the little breadcrumbs that I scattered. They'll show us the way home." When the moon rose and Hansel looked for the breadcrumbs, they were gone, because the many thousands of birds that fly about the forest had found them and gobbled them up. Nevertheless, Hansel believed that he could find the way home and pulled Gretel along with him, but they soon lost their way in the great wilderness. They walked the entire night and all the next day as well, from morning till night, until they fell asleep from exhaustion. And they walked for one more day, but they didn't find their way out of the forest. They were now also very hungry, for they had nothing to eat except some berries that they had found growing on the ground. On the third day, they continued walking until noon. Then they came to a little house made of bread with cake for a roof and pure sugar for windows. "Let's sit down and eat until we're full," said Hansel. "I want to eat a piece of the roof. Gretel, you can have part of the window since it's sweet." Hansel had already eaten a good piece of the roof, and Gretel had devoured a couple of small round windows and was about to break off a new one, when they heard a shrill voice cry from inside. "Nibble, nibble, I hear a louse. Who's that nibbling on my house?" Hansel and Gretel were so tremendously frightened that they dropped what they had in their hands, and immediately thereafter, a small ancient woman crept out of the door. She shook her head and said, "Well now, dear children, where have you come from? Come inside with me. You'll have a good time. Thank you for the follow, Sunny." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then she served them a good meal of milk and pancakes with sugar and apples and nuts. Afterward, she made up 2 beautiful beds, and when Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, they thought they were in heaven. The old woman, however, was really a wicked witch on the lookout for children and had built the house made of bread only to lure them in to her. As soon as she had any children in her power, she would kill, cook, and eat them. It would be like a feast day for her. Therefore, she was quite happy that Hansel and Gretel had come her way. Early the next morning, before the children were awake, she got up and looked at the 2 of them sleeping so sweetly, and she was delighted and thought, "There'll certainly be a tasty meal for you." Then she grabbed Hansel and stuck him into a coop, and when he woke up, he was behind a wire mesh used to lock up chickens, and he couldn't move about. Immediately after, she shook Gretel and yelled, "Get up, you lazy bones. Fetch some water, and then go into the kitchen and cook something nice. Your brother's sitting in a chicken coop. I want to fatten him up, and when he's fat enough, I'm going to eat him. But now, I want you to feed him." Gretel was frightened and wept, but she had to do what the witch demanded. So the very best food was cooked for poor Hansel, so that he would become fat, while Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every day, the old woman came and called out, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can feel whether you're fat enough." However, Hansel stuck out a little bone, and the witch was continually puzzled that Hansel didn't get any fatter. One evening, after a month had passed, she said to Gretel, "Get a move on and fetch some water. I don't care whether your little brother's fat enough or not. He's going to be slaughtered and boiled tomorrow. In the meantime, I want to prepare the dough so that we can also bake." So Gretel went off with a sad heart and fetched the water in which Hansel was to be boiled. Early the next morning, Gretel had to get up, light the fire, and hang up a kettle full of water. Thank you for the hydrate. "Make sure that it boils," said the witch. "I'm going to light the fire in the oven and shove the bread inside." Gretel was standing in the kitchen and wept bloody tears and thought, "It would have been better if the wild animals in the forest had eaten us. Then we would have died together. I wouldn't have had to bear this sorrow, and I wouldn't have to boil the water that will be the death of my dear brother. Oh dear God, help us poor children get out of this predicament." Then the old woman called out, "Gretel, come right away over here to the oven." When Gretel came, she said, "Look inside. and see if the bread is already nice and brown and well done. My eyes are weak. I can no longer see so well from a distance. And if you can't see, then sit down on the board and I'll shove you inside. Then you can get around inside and check everything. Lois wanted to shut the oven door once Gretel was inside, but she wanted to bake her in the hot oven and eat her too. This was what the Wicked Witch had planned, and why she had called the girl. But God inspired Gretel, and she said, I don't know how to do it. First, you show it to me. Sit down on the board, and I'll shove you inside. And so the old woman sat down on the board. And since she was light, Gretel shoved her inside as far as she could, and then she quickly shut the oven door and bolted it with an iron bar. The old woman began to scream and groan in the hot oven, but Gretel ran off, and the witch was miserably burned to death. Meanwhile, Gretel went straight to Hansel and opened the door to the coop. After Hansel jumped out, they kissed each other and were glad. The entire house was full of jewels and pearls, so they filled their pockets with them. Then they went off and found their way home. Their father rejoiced when he saw them again. He hadn't spent a single happy day since his children had been away. Now, he was a rich man. However, the mother had died. The end. Thank you for the lurk, Sunny. And for the hydrate. These fairy tales are actually pretty morbid. They are, yeah, like, why are they stuffing children into ovens? Why is it always children? But I guess because these fairy tales were made for children, and they were made to teach children lessons, right? Well, I'm assuming they were meant to frighten children. But who would have thought that, like, parents would choose to tell children these stories? But I'm sure you guys have heard all of them, right? You would? Yeah, I know you would. You especially. But reading these stories as an adult feels like, I don't know, like everything's kind of a little bit messed up, isn't it? Also, like, some of these children are really smart. Like, Hansel. Hansel was really smart. I don't know. If I ever had children, I don't know if I would tell my children these stories. But I would tell you guys. It'll creep you out a little. Okay, we have... Do we want to read Rumpelstiltskin? Oh. Rumpelstiltskin is a really short one. Was only like a page long. Hansel and Gretel was like 5 pages. It's pretty long. I also don't really know how to spell this. Yeah. Okay. Today, hold on. I've realized people have been reading my pet, but I don't have the pet on this page. So I will add the pet to the scene. Also, I'm really surprised that nobody has tried to claim the specials. I think we don't have people here that want to make my life difficult. So I think we're good. That's nice. What's nice? You're being nice humans? I see. Is it because you don't want me to read Twilight? Do you? Thank you for the follow, sis. Welcome to the stream. We're reading from Grimm's version of fairy tales today. We've read Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and Hansel and Gretel. We're just about to read Rumpelstiltskin. Yes, welcome, and thank you for the follow. For anyone who is new, I will respond to all chats after I'm done with the story. While I'm reading the story, I will just be reading the story. Hi, you say welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. I hope you're having a good day. We're reading fairy tales today, so the tide. This fairy tale is called Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, there was a miller who was poor. Whoa. Yeah, look, it just made me laugh. Good. So this story is called Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, there was a miller who was poor, but he had a beautiful daughter. Now, one day he happened to talk to the king and said, I have a daughter who knows the art of transforming straw into gold. So the king had the miller's daughter summoned to him right away. and ordered her to spin all the straw in her room into gold in one night. And if she couldn't do this, she would die. And she was locked in the room where she sat and wept. For the life of her, she didn't have the slightest inkling of how to spin straw into gold. All of a sudden, a little man entered the room and said, "What will you give me if I spin everything into gold?" She took off her necklace and gave it to the little man, and he did what he promised. The next morning, the king found the entire room filled with gold. But because of this, his heart grew even greedier, and he locked the miller's daughter in another room full of straw that was even larger than the first, and she was to spin it all into gold. And the little man came again, and she gave him a ring from one of her fingers, and everything was spun into gold. However, on the third night, the king had her locked again in another room that was larger than the other two and filled with straw. "If you succeed, you shall become my wife," he said. And the little man came again and spoke, "I'll do everything for you one more time, but you must promise me your firstborn child that you have with the king." Out of desperation, she promised him what he wanted. And when the king saw, once again, how the straw had been spun into gold, he took the miller's beautiful daughter for his wife. Soon thereafter, the queen gave birth, and the little man appeared before her and demanded the promised child. However, the queen offered the little man all that she could and all the treasures of the kingdom, if he would let her keep her child. But it was all in vain. And the little man said, "In 3 days, I'll come again to fetch the child, and if you know my name by then, you shall keep your child." During the first and second nights, the queen tried to think of the little man's name, but she wasn't able to come up with a name and became completely depressed. On the third day, however, the king returned home from hunting and told her, "I was out hunting the day before yesterday, and when I went deep into the dark forest, I came upon a small cottage, and in front of the house there was a ridiculous little man hopping around as if he had only one leg and screeching. Today I'll brew, tomorrow I'll bake, and I'll have the queen's namesake. Oh, how hard it is to play my game, for Rumpelstiltskin is my name." When the queen heard this, she rejoiced, and when the dangerous little man came, he asked, "What's my name, your highness?" She responded first by guessing, "Is your name Conrad?" "No." "Is your name Henry?" "No." "Is your name Rumpelstiltskin?" "The devil told you that," the little man screamed, and he ran off full of anger and never returned. The end. Kidnapper arc. I don't know what it is with all of these fairy tale evil villains and wanting children or firstborns. Is there something special about them? And Diablo, the note is for... The note says I cannot laugh if I read a pickup line. So as part of the special, if I get a sub, I read one cringe pickup line and I cannot laugh when I read the cringe pickup line. Hi monkey, welcome, welcome. How are you? Children are evil. I agree. You know, if I was her, right, I would just not have a child. Then I can't give him my firstborn child, right? Just came back from watching a movie. Was it a good movie? Oh yeah, for those of you who might be watching on mobile or a smaller screen, the specials say that for every sub or 100, not 100, 500 bits, I will read a cringe pickup line in the cringiest voice and I cannot laugh. And for every 5 subs, or if I hit my daily sub goal, I will read a chapter from Twilight. Very painfully. So those are my specials for today. A lot of fighting. That sounds like fun. I love a good action movie. Monkey! Monkey! Monkey. Oh my god. Oh my god! Okay, wait, that's... Thank you for the follow, Deku. Okay. I will read one cringe pickup line and I won't laugh, okay? Okay. But I'll have to say it as seriously as possible. I don't want to do this. Knew it. God damn it, monkey. But thank you for the gifted sub. Anyway, I'm going to RNG. And then I'll pick a pickup line. It will pick a pickup line from this list. $39. Okay. I can't laugh. I can't laugh. I can't laugh. I will not laugh. You're so beautiful that you made me forget my pickup line. Holding my breath. No, I don't laugh. That was the pickup line, by the way. Taking deep breaths. Everyone take deep breaths with me. In and out. That's okay, Diablo. You don't have to do the 5-sub thing. I'm pretty sure nobody wants me to read Twilight. I might actually cry. Okay. Monkey, since you just got here, what fairy tale would you like? We have Cinderella. We have Puss in Boots. We have Little Snow White. What am I crying for? If you've never read Twilight, yeah. I don't want to read Twilight. Puss in Boots? Okay, okay. Puss in Boots it is. I will cry if I read Twilight because it's so cringy. Okay. I don't think I've ever read Puss in Boots actually, so here we go. Puss in Boots. A miller had 3 sons, a mill, a donkey, and a cat. The sons had to grind grain, the donkey had to haul the grain and carry away the flour, and the cat had to catch the mice. When the miller died, the 3 sons divided the inheritance. The oldest received the mill, the second the donkey, and nothing was left for the third, the cat. This made the youngest sad, and he said to himself, I certainly got the worst part of the bargain. My oldest brother can grind wheat, and my second brother can ride on his donkey. But what can I do with the cat? Once I make a pair of gloves out of his fur, it's all over. The cat, who had understood everything that he had said, began to speak. Listen, there's no need to kill me when all you'll get will be a pair of poor gloves from my fur. Have some boots made for me instead. Then I'll be able to go out, mix with people, and help you before you know it. The miller's son was surprised the cat could speak like that. But since the shoemaker happened to be walking by, he called him inside and had him fit the cat for a pair of boots. When the boots were finished, the cat put them on. After that, he took a sack, filled the bottom with grains of wheat, and attached a piece of cord to the top, which he could pull to close it. Then he slung the sack over his back and walked out the door on 2 legs like a human being. At that time, there was a king ruling the country, and he liked to eat partridges. However, recently the situation had become grave for him because the partridges had become difficult to catch. The whole forest was full of them, but they frightened so easily that none of the huntsmen had been able to get near them. The cat knew this and thought he could do much better than the huntsmen. When he entered the forest, he opened the sack, spread the grains of wheat on the ground, placed the cord in the grass, and strung it out behind a hedge. Then he crawled in back of the hedge, hid himself, and lay in wait. Soon, the partridges came running, found the wheat, and hopped into the sack, one after the other. When a good number were inside, the cat pulled the cord. Once the sack was closed tight, he ran over to it and wrung their necks. Then he slung the sack over his back and went straight to the king's castle. The sentry called out, "Stop! Where are you going?" "To the king," the cat answered curtly. "Are you crazy? A cat to the king?" "Oh, let him go," another sentry said. "The king's often very bored. Perhaps the cat will give him some pleasure with his meowing and purring." When the cat appeared before the king, he bowed and said, "My lord, the count," and he uttered a long, distinguished name, sent you his regards. and would like to offer you these partridges, which he recently caught in his traps. The king was amazed by the beautiful fat partridges. Indeed, he was so overcome with joy that he commanded the cat to take as much gold from his treasury as he could carry and put it into the sack. Bring it to your lord and give him my very best thanks for his gift. Meanwhile, the poor miller's son sat at home by the window, propped his head up with his hand, and wondered why he had given away all he had for the cat's boots, when the cat would probably not be able to bring him anything great in return. Suddenly, the cat entered, threw down the sack from his back, opened it, and dumped the gold at the miller's feet. Now, you've got something for the boots. The king also sends his regards and best of thanks. The miller's son was happy to have such wealth, even though he didn't understand how everything had happened. However, as the cat was taking off his boots, he told him everything and said, "Surely you have enough money now, but we won't be content with that. Tomorrow I'm going to put on my boots again, and you shall become even richer." Incidentally, I told the king your account. The following day, the cat put on his boots, as he said he would, went hunting again, and brought the king a huge catch. As it went every day, and every day the cat brought back gold to the miller's son. At the king's court, he became a favorite, so that he was permitted to go and come and wander about the castle wherever he pleased. One day, as the cat was lying by the hearth in the king's kitchen and warming himself, the coachman came and started cursing. "May the devil take the king and princess. I wanted to go to the tavern, have a drink, and play some cards. But now they want me to drive them to the lake so they can go for a walk." When the cat heard that, he ran home and said to his master, "If you want to be a rich count, come with me to the lake and go for a swim." The miller didn't know what to say. Nevertheless, he listened to the cat and went with him to the lake, where he undressed and jumped into the water completely naked. Meanwhile, the cat took his clothes, carried them away, and hid them. No sooner had he done it than the king came driving by. Now, the cat began to wail in a miserable voice, "Ah, most gracious king, my lord went for a swim in the lake, and a thief came and stole his clothes that were lying on the bank. Now the count is in the water and can't get out. If he stays in much longer, he'll freeze and die." When the king heard that, he ordered the coach to stop, and one of his servants had to race back to the castle and fetch some of the king's garments. The count put on the splendid clothes, and since the king had already taken a liking to him because of the partridges that he believed had been sent by the count, he asked the young man to sit down next to him in the coach. The princess was not in the least angry about this, for the count was young and handsome and pleased her a great deal. In the meantime, the cat went on ahead of them and came to a large meadow where there were over 100 people making hay. "Who owns this meadow, my good people?" asked the cat. "The great sorcerer." "Listen to me. The king will be driving by, and when he asks who the owner of this meadow is, I want you to answer, 'The count.' If you don't, you'll all be killed." Then the cat continued on his way and came to a wheat field, so enormous that nobody could see over it. There were more than 200 people standing there and cutting wheat. "Who owns this wheat, my good people?" "The sorcerer." "Listen to me. The king will be driving by, and when he asks who the owner of this wheat is, I want you to answer, 'The Count.' If you don't do this, you'll all be killed." Finally, the cat came to a splendid forest where more than 300 people were chopping down large oak trees and cutting them into wood. "Who owns this forest, my good people?" "The sorcerer." "Listen to me. The king will be driving by, and when he asks who the owner of this forest is, I want you to answer, 'The Count.' If you don't do this, you will all be killed." The cat continued on his way, and the people watched him go. Then he looked so unusual and walked in boots like a human being. They were afraid of him. Soon the cat came to the sorcerer's castle, walked boldly inside, and appeared before the sorcerer, who looked at him scornfully and asked him what he wanted. The cat bowed and said, "I've heard that you can turn yourself into a dog, a fox, or even a wolf. But I don't believe that you can turn yourself into an elephant. That seems impossible for me, and this is why I've come. I want to be convinced with my own eyes." "That's just a trifle for me," the sorcerer said arrogantly, and within seconds he turned himself into an elephant. "That's great, but can you also turn yourself into a lion?" "Nothing to it," said the sorcerer, and he suddenly stood before the cat as a lion. The cat pretended to be terrified and cried out, "That's incredible and unheard of. Never in my dreams would I have thought this possible. But you'd top all of this if you could turn yourself into a tiny animal, such as a mouse. I'm convinced that you could do more than any other sorcerer in the world. But that would be too much for you." The flattery had made the sorcerer quite friendly, and he said, "Oh no, dear cat, that's not too much at all." And soon he was running around the room as a mouse. All at once, the cat ran after him, caught the mouse in one leap, and ate him up. While all this was happening, the king had continued driving with the count and princess had come to the large meadow. "Who owns the hay?" the king asked. "The count," the people all cried out, just as the cat had ordered them to. "You've got a nice piece of land, Count," the king said. Afterward, they came to the large wheat field. "Who owns that wheat, the good people?" "The count." "Why, you've got quite a large and beautiful estate." Next, they came to the forest. "Who owns these woods, my good people?" "The count." The king was even more astonished and said, "You must be a rich man, Count. I don't think I have a forest as splendid as yours." At last, they came to the castle. The cat stood on top of the stairs, and when the coach stopped below, he ran down, opened the door, and said, "Your Majesty, you've arrived at the castle of my lord, the Count. This honor will make him happy for the rest of his life." The king climbed out of the coach and was amazed by the magnificent building, which was almost larger and more beautiful than his own castle. The count led the princess up the stairs and into the hall, which was flickering with loads of gold and jewels. The princess became the count's bride, and when the king died, the count became king, and the Puss in Boots was his prime minister. The end. That's pretty long. Yeah, it was really long. Thank you for the follow though, Ron Tolkien. Thank you, thank you. Welcome to the stream. I also would like a cat that can make me rich. Right. Do you think one of your cats will be able to do that if you made a shoe for it? You too, right? Like, if I could put a shoe on a cat and the cat made me rich, I don't want to be a prime minister though. I think that's too much responsibility. Like, being in leadership is too difficult. Being rich is fine. Is that monkey? Is it? Is that wipeout? Also, I hope you guys didn't hear. My stomach made a really loud noise halfway through, and I had to pretend nothing happened. Do you think you're me? That's good. You think though? You don't know? Maybe I need a snack? But I have you guys here. Sorry, I'm sorry. Out of character. I will eat after. But it'll be lunchtime after I finish stream, so I'm sorry. Another pickup line for free. Was that cringy though? That wasn't cringy. And if it was cringy, don't say it. Wow, I didn't know that Puss in Boots made, like, the sun rich. I didn't know the story behind it. Interesting. The story of the three sons sounds like the story of the Deathly Hallows, I know. The three sons with three different things, inheritance. Similar. Yeah. And the one who got the cat is the one who got the invisibility cloak. Do you see the parallels? I wonder if there is a actual, like, printed version of the Tales of Beetle the Bard. I'll read it for my next ASMR if it actually exists. But it looks like we're finally down to Cinderella and Snow White that we haven't read yet out of the more common ones on this list. So, what will it be? Cinderella or Snow White? No White? Okay. as the title for Snow White here is called Little Snow White. I wonder why though. Can you guys see it? The list. Is that too dark? You can see it? Okay. It's the glare from the background is a bit intense. Snow White is quite long, though. Everyone, grab a snack or get comfortable, drink some water, grab a blanket. We're in for a ride. This fairy tale is Little Snow White. Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, when snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, a beautiful queen was sitting and sewing at a window with black ebony frame. And as she was sewing and looking out the window at the snow, she pricked her finger with a needle. And 3 drops of blood fell on the snow. The red looked so beautiful on the white snow that she thought to herself, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the window frame. Soon after, she gave birth to a little daughter who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. That's why the child was called Little Snow White. The queen was the most beautiful woman in the entire land and very proud about her beauty. She also had a mirror, and every morning she stepped in front of it and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" The mirror would answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." And then she knew for certain that there was nobody more beautiful in the entire world. However, Little Snow White grew up, and when she was 7 years old, she was so beautiful that her beauty surpassed even that of the queen. And when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" the mirror answered, "You, my queen, may have a beauty quite rare, but Little Snow White is 1,000 times more fair." When the queen heard the mirror speak this way, she became pale with envy, and from that hour onward she hated Snow White. And when she looked at her and thought that Little Snow White was to blame that she, the queen, was no longer the most beautiful woman in the world, her heart turned against Little Snow White. Thank you for the follow, Frosty Nora. Her jealousy kept upsetting her, and so she summoned the huntsman and said, "Take the child out into the forest, to a spot far from here, and stab her to death, and bring me back her lungs and liver as proof of your deed. After that, I'll cook them with salt and eat them." The huntsman took little Snow White and led her out into the forest, but when he drew his hunting knife and was about to stab her, she began to weep and plead so much to let her live, and promised never to return, but to run deeper into the forest. The huntsman was moved to pity, also because she was so beautiful. Anyway, he thought the wild beasts in the forest would soon devour her. I'm glad that I won't have to kill her. Just then, a young boar came dashing by, and the huntsman stabbed it to death. He took out the lungs and liver and brought them to the queen as proof that the child was dead. Then she boiled them in salt, ate them, and thought she had eaten little Snow White's lungs and liver. Meanwhile, little Snow White was so all alone in the huge forest that she became afraid and began to run and run over sharp stones and through thorn bushes. She ran the entire day. Finally, as the sun was about to set, she came upon a little cottage that belonged to 7 dwarfs. However, they were not at home, but had gone to the mines. When little Snow White entered, she found everything tiny but dainty and neat. There was a little table with a white tablecloth, and on it were 7 little plates with 7 tiny spoons, 7 tiny knives and tiny forks, and 7 tiny cups. In a row against the wall stood 7 little beds, recently covered with sheets. Since she was so hungry and thirsty, little Snow White ate some vegetables and bread from each of the little plates, and had a drop of wine to drink out of each of the tiny cups. And since she was so tired, she wanted to lay down and sleep. So she began trying out the beds, but none of them suited her, until she found that the 7th one was just right. So she lay down in it and fell asleep. When it turned night, the 7 dwarfs returned home from their work and lit their 7 candles. Then they saw that someone had been in their house. The first dwarf said, "Who's been sitting in my chair?" "Who's eaten off my plate?" said the second. "Who's eaten some of my bread?" said the third. "Who's eaten some of my vegetables?" said the fourth. "Who's been using my little fork?" said the fifth. "Who's been cutting with my little knife?" said the sixth. "Who's had something to drink from my little cup?" said the seventh. Then the first dwarf looked around and said, "Who's been sleeping in my bed?" Then the second cried out, "Someone's been sleeping in my bed." And he was followed by each one of them until the 7th dwarf looked at his bed and saw little Snow White lying there asleep. The others came running over to him, and they were so astounded that they screamed and fetched their 7 little candles to observe little Snow White. Oh my lord," they exclaimed, "how beautiful she is." They took great delight in her, but didn't wake her up. Instead, they let her sleep in the bed. While the 7th dwarf spent an hour in each of his companions' bed until the night had passed. When little Snow White awoke, they asked her who she was and how she had managed to come to their cottage. Then she told them how her mother had wanted to have her killed, how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she had run all day until she had eventually arrived at their cottage. Then the dwarves took pity on her and said, "If you'll keep house for us, cook, sew, make the beds, watch, and knit, and if you'll keep everything neat and orderly, you can stay with us, and we'll provide you with everything you need." When we come home in the evening, dinner must be ready. During the day, we're in the mines and dig for gold. You'll be alone and will have to watch out for the queen and not let anyone enter the cottage. In the meantime, the queen believed that she was once again the most beautiful queen in the land and stepped before the mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered, "You, my queen, may have a beauty quite rare. But beyond the 7 mountains, this I must tell, little Snow White is living quite well. Indeed, she is still 1,000 times more fair." When the queen heard this, she was horrified, for she saw that she had been deceived and that the huntsman had not killed little Snow White. Since nobody but the 7 dwarfs lived in the 7 mountain regions, the queen knew immediately that little Snow White was dwelling with them, and began once again plotting ways to kill her. As long as the mirror refused to say that she was the most beautiful woman in the land, she would remain upset. Since she couldn't be absolutely certain and didn't trust anyone, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman, painted her face so that nobody could recognize her, and went to the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, where she knocked on the door and cried out, "Open up! Open up! I'm the old peddler woman. I've got pretty wares for sale." "What do you have for sale?" little Snow White said, looking out the window. "Hey, laces, dear child," the old woman replied, and took out a lace woven from yellow, red, and blue silk. "Do you want it?" "Well, yes," said little Snow White, and thought, "I can certainly let this good old woman inside. She's honest enough." So little Snow White unbolted the door and bought the lace. "My goodness, you're so sloppily laced up," said the old woman. "Come, I'll lace you up properly for once." Little Snow White stood in front of the old woman, but took the lace and tied it around little Snow White so tightly that she lost her breath and fell down as if dead. Then the queen was satisfied and left. Not long after nightfall, the dwarfs came home, and when they saw their dear Snow White lying on the ground, they were horrified, for she seemed to be dead. They lifted her up, and when they saw that she was laced too tightly, they cut the lace in two. At once she began to breathe a little, and after a while she had fully revived. There was nobody else but the queen, they said. She wanted to take your life. Be careful, and don't let anyone else enter the cottage. Now, the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" The queen answered, "You, my queen, may have a beauty quite rare, but little Snow White's alive, this I must tell. She's with the dwarfs and doing quite well. Indeed, she's still 1,000 times more fair." The queen was so horrified that all her blood rushed to her heart when she realized that little Snow White was alive once again. So she began thinking day and night how she could put an end to little Snow White. Finally, she made a poisoned comb, disguised herself in a completely different shape, and went off to the dwarf's cottage once again. When she knocked on the door, however, the little Snow White called out, I'm not allowed to let anyone enter. The queen then took out the comb, and when little Snow White saw it shine, and that the woman was someone entirely different from the one she had previously met, she opened the door and bought the comb. Said the peddler woman, I'll also comb your hair. But no sooner did the old woman stick the comb in little Snow White's hair than the maiden fell down and was dead. Now you'll remain lying there, the queen said, and her heart had become lighter as she returned home. However, the dwarves came just in the nick of time. When they saw what had happened, they pulled the poisoned comb out of little Snow White's hair, and she opened her eyes and was alive again. She promised the dwarfs that she would certainly not let anyone inside again. Now, the queen stepped in front of her mirror once more and asked, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all? The mirror answered, You, my queen, may have a beauty quite rare. But little Snow White's alive, this I must tell. She's with the dwarfs and doing quite well. Indeed, she's still 1,000 times more fair. When the queen heard this once again, she trembled and shook with rage. Little Snow White shall die, she exclaimed, even if it costs me my own life. Then she went into a secret chamber where no one was allowed to enter. Once inside, she made a deadly, poisonous apple. On the outside, it looked beautiful with red cheeks. Anyone who saw it would be enticed to take a bite. Thereafter, she disguised herself as a peasant woman, went to the dwarf's cottage, and knocked on the door. Little Snow White looked and said, I'm not allowed to let anyone inside. The 7 dwarfs have strictly forbidden me. Well, if you don't want to let me in, I can't force you, answered the peasant woman. I'll surely get rid of my apples in time, but let me give you one to test. No, said little Snow White. I'm not allowed to take anything. The dwarfs won't let me. You're probably afraid, said the woman. Look, I'll cut the apple in 2. You eat the beautiful red half. However, the apple had been made with such cunning that only the red part was poisoned. When little Snow White saw the peasant woman eating her half, and when her desire to taste the apple grew stronger, she finally let the peasant woman give her the other half through the window. As soon as she took a bite of the apple, she fell to the ground and was dead. The queen rejoiced, went home, and asked the mirror, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? And the mirror answered, You, my queen, are now the fairest of all. Now I can rest in peace, she said. Once again, I'm the most beautiful in the land. And Snow White will remain dead this time. When the dwarfs came home from the mines that evening, they found little Snow White lying on the ground, and she was dead. They unlaced her and tried to find something poisonous in her hair, but nothing helped. They couldn't revive her. So they laid her on a bier, and all 7 of them sat down beside it and wept for 3 whole days. Then they intended to bury her, but she looked more alive than dead, and she still had such pretty red cheeks. So instead, they made a glass coffin.
Emotional, damn it!
Who the fuck said that? Oh my god. I'm so sorry. Where was I? I completely lost myself. Okay. Then they intended to bury her, but she looked more alive than dead, and she still had such pretty red cheeks. So instead, they made a glass coffin and placed her inside so that she could easily be seen. Then they wrote her name on the coffin in gold letters and added the family name. One of the dwarves remained at home every day to keep watch over her. When little Snow White lay in the coffin for a long time, these alerts doing ASMR. Shit. Did I manage to stop it in time? Okay, good. Holy frick. Anyway, thanks for the follow, chibi. I read follows after I finish the story, but thank you. My heart, I think my heart stopped for a second. Holy shit. Okay, let me finish this. Then they wrote her name on the coffin in gold letters and added the family name. One of the dwarves remained at home every day to keep watch over her. So little Snow White lay in the coffin for a long time, but did not rot. She was still white as snow and red as blood, and if her eyes would have opened, they would have been black as ebony, for she lay there as if she were sleeping. Now, it happened that a prince came to the dwarf's cottage one day and wanted to spend the night there. When he entered the room and saw little Snow White lying in the coffin and the 7 little candles casting their light right on her, he couldn't get enough of her beauty. Then he read the golden inscription and saw that she was a princess. So he asked the dwarfs to sell him the coffin with the dead little Snow White inside, but they wouldn't accept all the gold in the world for it. Then he pleaded with them to give little Snow White to him as a gift, because he couldn't live without gazing upon her, and he would honor her and hold her in high regard as his most beloved in the world. Well, the dwarves took pity on him and gave him the coffin, and the prince had it carried to his castle. It was then placed in his room, where he himself sat the entire day and couldn't take his eyes off her. But when he had to leave the room and couldn't see a little Snow White, he became sad. Indeed, he couldn't eat a thing unless he was standing near the coffin. However, the servants who had to carry the coffin from place to place in the castle all the time became angry about this. And at one time, the servant opened the coffin, lifted little Snow White into the air, and said, "Why must we be plagued with so much work all because of a dead maiden?" On saying this, he shoved little Snow White's back with his hand, and out popped the nasty piece of apple that had been stuck in little Snow White's throat, and she was once again alive. As soon as this happened, she went to the prince, and when he saw his dear little Snow White alive, he rejoiced so much that he didn't know what to do. Then they sat down at the dinner table and ate with delight. The wedding was planned for the next day, and Snow White's godless mother was also invited to attend. When she now stepped before the mirror, she said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the mirror replied, "You, my queen, may have a beauty quite rare, but little Snow White is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard this, she was horrified and became so afraid, so very afraid, that she didn't know what to do. However, her jealousy drove her so much that she wanted to be seen at the wedding. When she arrived, she saw that little Snow White was the bride. Iron slippers were then heated over a fire. The queen had to put them on and dance in them, and her feet were miserably burned, but she had to keep dancing in them until she danced herself to death. The end. Hi Nat, welcome to the stream. How are you? Hi Elmo. Thank you for the follow. And hi Cho. Oh, thanks for the lurk. Oh, or Frost. Ruin Frost. Yeah. Did I miss any more follows? Okay. Dance to Death, yeah. I've never heard of this version before. Like, I didn't know that, like, the prince took her and, like, just kept her dead with him all the time. And then they tortured the queen to death. This was really morbid. Like, really incredibly morbid. Nat, you missed a whole bunch of fairy tales. But this is the original ending. And in the Disney one, you know, it's just the prince, this is her true love's kiss, wakes her up, and then they get married and live happily ever after. I think they do kill the witch though. I mean, the queen. But I don't think they kill her with iron shoes. Iron shoes that burn her to death. But yeah, now in the original version, it makes the prince sound a little bit psychotic. Like he just had a dead girl in his house that he carried everywhere. He was like, I don't think that's very normal, guys. But now that I think about, like, even the Disney version and how, like, they had to kiss her to bring her back to life. She was a dead girl. Renee ear licks? Oh no, my specialty is not ear licks. My specialty is slurping. If you want, I can slurp. I don't have a VDIO mic. Oh. It won't sound as good. No ear licks? I've no 3D-IO. I'm using a regular mic. I don't think it will be the same. Do I have a blue yeti? No, I have the Elgato wave. I can slurp. Shall we do one last fairy tale? We have Cinderella left. Let's see how messed up this is. Yes? Okay. Do you think it's gonna be more or less messed up than Snow White? Oh, wait, Diablo, you asked a question just now at the start. What would be better for a reading story? Having coffee, tea, or hot chocolate? Personally, I would say for anyone else, hot chocolate, but for myself, coffee, because I am an addict and I need the caffeine. Thanks for the lurk and thanks for the follow, Tony. Thank you, thank you. I am an addict, caffeine addict. I need coffee. But yeah, I don't know the full story of any of these fairy tales, so it's been really interesting. Drink tea? Oh, thank you. You can keep your plant water to yourself. That's okay. The point of this ASMR is to put you to sleep, so I hope you are feeling sleepy and sleep well. Okay, last fairy tale for tonight was another long one, and it's Cinderella. For new followers and new people tuning in, I will read and answer questions and or new followers resumes or subs after the story. Okay? You are woke? Are you really woke? Also, just letting you know, we also have specials today. So, if you can see the specials menu, you can claim either a cringe pickup line or a chapter from Twilight if we hit it. Yeah? But for now, we will finish reading Cinderella and then we will see. Have a good night, Diablo. Sweet dreams. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a rich man who lived happily with his wife for a long time. And they had one little girl together. Then the wife became ill, and as she became deathly ill, she called her daughter and said, "Dear child, I must leave you, but when I am up in heaven, I shall look after you. Plant a little tree on my grave, and whenever you wish for something, shake it, and you'll have what you wish. And whenever you are otherwise in a predicament, then I'll send you help. But stay good and pure." After she said this, she closed her eyes and died. Her child wept and planted a little tree on her grave and didn't need to water it, for her tears were good enough. The snow covered the mother's grave like a little white blanket, and by the time the sun had taken it off again and the little tree had become green for the second time, the man had married a second wife. However, the stepmother already had 2 daughters from her first husband. They had beautiful features, but proud, nasty, and wicked hearts. After the wedding had now been celebrated, and all 3 entered the house, a difficult time began for the poor child. "What's this terrible and useless thing doing in our rooms?" the stepmother said. "Off with you to the kitchen. Whoever wants to eat bread must first earn it. She can be our maid." The stepsisters took away her clothes and dressed her in an old gray smock. "You look good in that," they said, while mocking her and leading her to the kitchen, where the poor child had to do heavy work. She had to get up before dawn, carry the water into the house, make the fire, cook, and wash. Meanwhile, her sisters did everything imaginable to cause her grief and make her look ridiculous. They poured peas and lentils into the ashes of the hearth, so she had to sit there the entire day and separate them. In the evening, when she was tired, there was no bed for her, and she had to lie next to the hearth in the ashes. And she always rummaged in dust and looked dirty. They named her Cinderella. At a certain time, the king decided to organize a magnificent ball that was to last 3 days. And his son was supposed to choose a bride at this event. The 2 proud stepsisters were also invited to it. "Cinderella," they called to her, "come up here. Comb out our hair, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles. We're going to see the prince at the ball." Cinderella worked hard and cleaned and brushed as well as she could. However, the stepsisters continually scolded her. And when they had finished dressing, they asked her in a mocking tone, "Cinderella, wouldn't you like to go to the ball?" "Oh, yes," Cinderella replied. "But how can I go? I don't have any clothes." "No," said the eldest daughter. "That's all we need for you to show up there. If the people heard that you were our sister, we'd be ashamed. You belong in the kitchen where there's a bowl full of lentils. When we return, they must be sorted, and take care that we don't find a bad one among them. Otherwise, you know what will happen to you." After the stepsisters left, and Cinderella stood there and looked after them, and when she could no longer see them, she went sadly into the kitchen and shook the lentils onto the hearth, and they formed a very large pile. "Oh," she sighed and said, "I'll have to sort them until midnight, and I won't be able to shut my eyes no matter how much they may hurt. If my mother knew about this." Then she knelt down in the ashes in front of the hearth and wanted to begin sorting. All at once, 2 white pigeons flew through the window and landed next to the lentils on the hearth. They nodded with their little heads and said, "Cinderella, would you like us to help you sort the lentils?" "Yes," answered Cinderella. "The good ones for the little pot, the bad ones for your little crop." And peck, 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 peck. They began and ate the bad ones and let the good ones remain. And in a quarter of an hour the lentils were so clean that there was not a bad one among them, and Cinderella could smooth them out in the little pot. Now the pigeon said to her, "Cinderella, If you want to see your sisters dance with the prince, then climb up to the pigeon coop. Cinderella followed them and climbed to the top of the ladder of the pigeon coop and could see the ballroom from there. Indeed, she could see her sisters dance with the prince. And after she had seen enough, she climbed down the ladder, and her heart was heavy. She laid herself down in the ashes and fell asleep. The next morning, the two sisters went into the kitchen, and when they saw that Cinderella had clearly sorted the lentils, they were angry because they would have liked to have scolded her. However, as they couldn't do that, they began to tell her about the ball and said, "Cinderella, that was so much fun, especially the dance. The prince, who is the most handsome in the world, led us out onto the dance floor, and one of us will become his bride." "Yes," Cinderella said, "I saw the chandeliers glimmer. That must have been splendid." "What? How did you manage that?" the older sister asked. "I climbed up to the pigeon coop." When the sister heard this, she was filled with jealousy, and she immediately ordered the pigeon coop to be torn down. Now, Cinderella had to comb and clean again, and the younger sister, who had a little sympathy in her heart, said, "Cinderella, when it turns dark, you can go to the ball and look in through the windows." "No," said the eldest, "that will only make her lazy." "Here's a sack of sweet peas, Cinderella. Sort the good from the bad and work hard. If you don't have them sorted cleanly by tomorrow, then I'll spill them all into the ashes and you'll have to starve until you fish them out of the ashes." Cinderella sat down on the hearth in distress and poured the peas out of the sack. Then the pigeons flew into the kitchen once again and asked, in a friendly way, "Cinderella, do you want us to sort the peas?" "Yes. The good ones for the little pot, the bad ones for your little crop." Peck, 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 peck. It all went so quickly as if 12 hands were there. And when they were finished, the pigeon said, "Cinderella, do you want to go and dance at the ball?" "Oh my God," she cried out. "But how can I go there in my dirty clothes?" "Go to the little tree on your mother's grave, shake it, and wish for clothes. However, you must return before midnight." So Cinderella went to the grave, shook the little tree, and spoke, "Shake and wobble, little tree. Let beautiful clothes fall down on me." No sooner had she said all this than a splendid dress lay right before her, along with pearls, silk stockings, silver slippers, and everything else that belonged to her outfit. Cinderella carried everything into the house, and after she had washed herself and dressed herself, she was as beautiful as a rose washed by the dew. And when she stepped outside, a carriage stood there, drawn by 6 black horses adorned with feathers. There were also servants dressed in blue and silver who helped her inside. Then off they galloped to the king's castle. When the prince saw the carriage come to a halt before the gate, he thought that a strange princess from afar had come traveling to the ball. So he himself went down the stairs, helped Cinderella out of the carriage, and led her into the ballroom. And when the glitter of the 4,000 chandeliers fell upon her, she was so beautiful that everyone there was amazed, and the sisters also stood there and were annoyed that some other young lady was more beautiful than they. However, they didn't think in the least that it might be Cinderella, who presumably was at home in the ashes. Now, the prince danced with Cinderella and showed her royal honor. As he danced, he thought to himself, I'm supposed to choose a bride, and I know she's the only one for me. On the other hand, Cinderella had lived for such a long time in ashes and sadness, and now she was in splendor and joy. For when midnight came, before the clock struck 12, she stood and bowed goodbye. Even though the prince begged and begged, she refused to remain any longer. So the prince led her down the stairs. The carriage was below and waiting for her, and it drove off in splendor as it had come. When Cinderella arrived home, she went once again to the little tree on her mother's grave. Shake and wobble, little tree, take these clothes back from me. Then the tree took the clothes, and Cinderella had her grey smock on again, and she returned to the kitchen with it, put some dust on her face, and laid herself down to sleep. In the morning, the sisters came. They looked morose and kept quiet, and Cinderella said, You must have had an enjoyable time last night. No, a princess was there, and the prince almost always danced with her. Nobody had ever seen her or knew where she came from. Was it perhaps that lady who arrived in the splendid carriage pulled by 6 black horses? How do you know this? As I was standing in the entrance to the house, I saw her drive by. In the future, they're inside working, said the eldest sister, who looked angrily at Cinderella. What business do you have to stand in the entrance to a house? For a third time, Cinderella had to dress up the 2 sisters, and as a reward, they gave her a bowl with peas that she had to sort. And don't you dare leave your work, the oldest sister cried out to her. Cinderella thought, if only my pigeons will return, and her heart beat anxiously until the pigeons came as they had the previous night and said, Cinderella, do you want us to sort the peas? Yes, the good ones for the little pot, the bad ones for your little crop. Once more the pigeons packed the bad ones out, and once they were finished, they said, Cinderella, check the little tree. It will throw down even more beautiful clothes. Go to the ball, but take care that you return before midnight. Cinderella went to her mother's grave. Shake and wobble, little tree. Let beautiful clothes fall down on me. Then a dress fell down, and it was even more glorious and splendid than the previous one. It was made out of gold and precious gems. In addition, there were golden faceted stockings and gold slippers, and after Cinderella was completely dressed, she glistened really like the sun at midday. A carriage drawn by 6 white horses that had plumes on their heads stopped in front of the house, and the servants were dressed in red and gold. When Cinderella arrived, the prince was already on the stairs and led her into the ballroom. And if everyone had been astonished by her beauty the day before, they were even more astounded this evening. And the sisters stood in a corner and were pale with envy. If they had known that it was Cinderella who was supposed to be at home in the ashes, they would have died of envy. Now, the prince wanted to know where the strange princess was, where she came from, and where she drove off to. So he had people stationed on the road, and they were to pay attention to her whereabouts. Moreover, he had the stairs painted with black pitch so that she wouldn't be able to run so fast. Cinderella danced and danced with the prince and was filled with so much joy that she didn't think about midnight. All of a sudden, as she was in the middle of a dance, she heard the clock begin to strike. She was reminded of the peasant's warning and was terrified. So she rushed to the door and flew down the stairs. However, Then she was covered with pitch. One of her golden slippers got caught, and Cinderella didn't stop to take it with her out of fear. Indeed, just as she reached the last step of the stairs, the clock struck 12. Consequently, the carriage and horses disappeared, and Cinderella stood in her grey smock on the dark road. In the meantime, the prince had rushed after her, and he found the golden slipper on the stairs. He pulled it from the pit and carried it with him, but by the time he made it down the stairs, everything had disappeared. Even the people who had stood guard came and said that they had seen nothing. Cinderella was glad that nothing worse had happened, and she went home. Once there, she turned on her dim oil lamp, hung it in the chimney, and laid herself down in the ashes. It didn't take long before the two sisters also returned and called out, "Cinderella, get up and light the way." Cinderella yawned and pretended that she had been awakened from her sleep. As she showed them the way, she heard one of the sisters say, "God knows where the presumable princess is. If she were only in her grave." The prince danced just with her alone, and after she had gone, he didn't want to remain, and the entire ball came to an end. It was really as if all the lights had suddenly been blown out, the others said. Meanwhile, the prince was thinking, if everyone else has gone wrong for you, now the slipper will help you find your bride. So he had a proclamation announced and declared that whichever maiden's foot with the golden slipper was to become his wife. But the slipper was much too small for anyone who tried it on. Indeed, many couldn't even slip their foot into the slipper, and couldn't have done so even if the slipper were two. Finally, it was the turn of the two sisters to take the test. They were glad because they had small, beautiful feet, and believed that it couldn't go wrong for them, and that the prince should have gone to them right away. "Listen," said the mother secretly, "here's a knife, and if the slipper is still too tight for you, then cut off a piece of your foot. It will hurt a bit, but what does it matter? It will soon pass, and one of you will become queen." So the eldest sister went into the chamber and tried on the slipper. Her toe slipped inside, but her heel was too large, so she took the knife and cut off a part of her heel until she could force her foot into the slipper. Then she went out of the chamber to the prince, and when he saw that she had the slipper on her foot, he said that she was to be his bride. Then he led her to the carriage and wanted to drive off. However, when he came to the gate, the peasants were above and called out, "Look you, look, at the shoe that she took. There's blood all over, the shoe's too small. She's not the bride that you met at the ball." The prince leaned over and saw that blood was spilling out of the slipper, and he realized that he had been deceived. So he brought the false bride back to the house. However, the mother said to her second daughter, "Take the slipper, and if it's too short for you, then cut off one of your toes." So the sister took the slipper into the chamber, and since her foot was too large, she bit her lips and cut off a large part of her toes. Then she quickly slipped her foot into the slipper and came out of the chamber. Since the prince thought she was the right bride, he wanted to drive off with her. However, when he came to the gate, the peasants called out again, "Looky, look, at the shoe that she took. There's blood all over, and the shoe's too small. She is not the bride you met at the ball." The prince looked down and saw that the stockings of the bride were colored red and that her blood was streaming out of the slipper. So the prince brought her to her mother and said, "She too is not the right bride, but is there another daughter in your house?" "No, there's just a nasty Cinderella. She sits below in the ashes. I'm sure the slipper won't fit her." The mother didn't want to have her summoned, but the prince demanded that she do so. Therefore, Cinderella was alerted, and when she heard that the prince was there, she washed her face and hands quickly so that they were fresh and clean. When she entered the room, she curtsied. Then the prince handed her to the golden slipper and said, "Try it on. If it fits, you'll become my wife." So Cinderella took off the heavy shoe from her left foot and put this foot into the golden slipper, and after she pressed a bit, her foot fit as though the slipper had been made for her. And when she stood up, the prince looked at her face and recognized the beautiful princess once again and cried, "This is the right bride." The stepmother and the two haughty sisters were horrified and became pale. But the prince led Cinderella away. He helped her into the carriage, and as they drove off through the gate, the pigeons called out, "Looky, look, there's no blood at all. The golden shoes are perfect fit. She's surely the bride you met at the ball." The end. Hello, Ophie. Welcome to the stream. That's fine. We were just finishing Cinderella. And also, thank you for the follow. Long, can I call you Long? And Kaito, thank you. Welcome. Ophie, you did come at the end though. So yeah, this version is a lot nastier than the Disney version. I can't believe they cut off their feet. And there's no fairy godmother as well. It's just the tree. Did you just say no Tohos? Right? What the fudge? But, you know, like, if you actually cut off your toes, like, you lose your sense of balance. And you won't be able to balance properly. So, I don't know how they walked out, but also, like, how on earth did the prince not notice the blood? Like, how do you not notice that the shoe is filled with blood? I don't get it. He blind? Yeah, he is kinda blind, right? Like, you should have recognized her face. Like, the minute she walked out, you should have recognized her face. Like, he fell in love with her at first sight, and yet doesn't know her face. Like, that doesn't even make sense. It's like a Superman and Clark Kent thing. The glasses. Where, like, you don't recognize him if he's wearing glasses? But anyway, I think I'm going to stop here for today because I don't know what it is about ASMR, but it really kills my throat. Like, is your throat supposed to hurt when you speak softly? I don't know. Thanks for the hydrate. I finished my whole bottle. I finished my whole bottle of water. But yeah, I think this is where I will end for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you to all the new followers. Wow, we got so many today. Holy shit. But yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone. Tomorrow we'll be continuing Little Nightmares, so stay tuned. And this time I will have a controller, so I will be able to play it properly. Yeah. Let's go. Also tomorrow is when the right night is, so if you can make it. If you can make it in my server, then it'll be fun. It'll be after stream, so if you're at stream, then yeah. But yes, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching. This was an experience. But yeah, thank you. I will not be rating because I don't want to ruin the ASMR chill vibe. So thank you. Bye bye. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye. Bye.